Get your man the flute to play song, the fuck.
Dear everyone, Kajima Atashiv, and welcome back to episode number 88 of the Inline G Flute podcast with me, your host, motherfucking Inline G. Listen, lads, I'm going to speed run this intro, so hold on to your arses. This episode was initially just for Gareth. It's a guest episode, and this week's guest was someone I was fucking obsessed with when I was like 16, 17, 18. When I started Inline G, I made a list of like my dream guests that I wanted to have in the podcast, and the list initially had 4 people on it. And that was Maggie Munier, Emmanuel Bayou, Jimmy Galway, and this person. Now, since finding out what that person has done since 2008 in the videos I'm talking about, it has made me so happy to see them thriving and doing so fucking well. And this episode is one of my all-time Inline G favourites. She is legit one of the most interesting people I have ever met. And we chatted about everything from fucking cadavers, weed, and abusive teaching to the power of baroque music and Janet Jackson's nipple. So this week's guest on the Inline G Flute podcast is my friend and yours, Molly McLaughlin. Now, usual listeners, you know what the crack is here. Skip ahead a minute or two, but if you're new around here, lend me your ears for just 1 minute. The Inline G podcast is free and always will be free. That is a motherfucking guarantee. But if you would like to support the podcast, you can now do so through the Patreon. On the screen now is the address, and for the audio listeners, it is patreon.com/the Inline G Flute podcast. It costs €5 a month, lads, whatever that is in your currency. And with that, you're genuinely keeping this podcast alive. I do everything around here on my own. This is a definition of a small independent podcast. I do the script writing, audio production, video production, graphic design, you name it. Inline G fucking does it around here. Now, we could have sponsors on, but I don't want to get sponsors on, because every time sponsors have approached me, they've said, oh, you can't talk about this, you can't talk about that, you can't swear, you can't mention mental health, blah, blah, blah. So, if you support the Patreon, it means I can tell sponsors to go and fuck themselves, and I can make the content that you want directly for you. It is a beautiful thing that we have a self-funded podcast here. The listeners or what pay for this podcast. It's fucking amazing in the modern world, and I'm getting paid for my art and creating art by you guys. It's a fucking beautiful system. Now, if you sign up to it, you don't really get any extra episodes, because I do believe every episode of Inline G should be free for everybody. You'll get a couple of benefits. You'll get to chat to me. You know, you get your own trading card. You get early access to certain things. I look after you guys, but the main reason you're doing it is to support the podcast. So if you can afford it, please go up and sign up over there. Don't do it in the app. Don't download the Patreon app, because Apple take 30%. Do it on your browser, okay? If you can afford it, please go and sign up there. It is massively appreciated. You're honestly keeping this podcast alive. You can unsubscribe at any time. Just jump in and out. I do it all the fucking time. So if you can afford it, €5 a month, it is a massive help, and I cannot tell you how much I appreciate it. But listen, if you can't afford it, times are hard. We're all artists here. Most of us are. Cost of living crisis. Donald Trump's ruining the world. We don't have that much money. So if you can't afford it, that's fine. You can keep listening for free. Someone else is paying so that you can do so. So here is this week's Inline G podcast with 16-year-old Gareth's favourite flute player and so much more, Molly McLaughlin. I started this podcast like a year and a half ago, something like that. We're on like episode 88 or something. So 88 weeks ago, I started the podcast. And when I did it, it was originally just solo episodes. And then about 10 weeks in, I got a couple of guests on. I was like, oh yeah, I can do the odd guest episode and things like that. So I made a list of people I wanted to get on. And I swear you were one of the first names on that list. Like one of my first 4 names on the list. Purely because, and I'm going to admit this all now, so we can get this out of the way early. When I was like 16, the video of you playing ZoomTube came out. Yeah. Okay. And then the video I was particularly hooked on was the one of polka.com, the Eileen Ivers tune. I was hooked on that video. Like I swear I've watched that video like thousands of times. As a teenager, I was mad for it.
First of all, thank you so much.
You're welcome.
So glad to hear that and also meet you and chat. This is new to me. I was like, oh, what is this amazing podcast with the best name? It's like the best flute name. Yeah, and so you. Good. So just yay. And those videos were so fun. ZoomTube was definitely like a big awakening for me in a way, because it was, I've always had this knowing that like I love flute in all contexts. And also when extended techniques started getting mixed into the picture, I was like, there we go, that feels much more like me.
Yeah.
And I played that for Ian Clark. And it was hilarious because I had been in a workshop with him in somewhere in England, and he played it, and it was so much more proper than what I had interpreted. And anyway, I just went up and I was like, whatever, I'm going to do what I'm going to do. And I remember him sitting there sort of like, that's not exactly what I wrote, but I like it. And I was like, okay, great. That works.
Well, there's a few compliments better than that, isn't there?
Yeah.
Oh, it was such I think that's how I found it, because I was looking up ZoomTube at that time. I was about 16, 17 when this came out, and I was going to college, and everyone was playing ZoomTube. It was like the thing, but there wasn't, YouTube was in its infancy. There wasn't that many versions of it. So just searching ZoomTube flute, you came up, and then I went to your profile and found the other ones. The other ones were much more interesting for me. I thought they were amazing. I cannot tell you, again, that polka.com thing, I was obsessed with them. Like I tried, if I went and found my old laptop, the amount of times I tried to like notate it to write it out so I could play it myself, but never successfully. I mean, I could probably do it now, but well.
I have that written out somewhere. it's somewhere in the
16 years later. 16 years. I've been waiting for that cheap
cycle.
Music. Yeah, I could have asked 16 years ago, but yeah. Also, for anyone that doesn't know these videos, I'm sure they'll find them, but I think they were for a competition?
Yeah. Yes. The Brio Alternative Flute Competition, which I don't know if they even did more than 1 year.
Okay.
But it was a friend of mine was one of the judges, and she put out the word to, everybody. I was like, okay, I'll try. And yeah, it's how I won my alto flute. I came in second, but I did get a free alto flute, which is an instrument I still play quite often.
Okay. Was it all online, the competition?
Yeah.
Okay, and you came second. I've always wondered if you won it or not. You never told us in the video, so I've always wondered. I wonder if you got the first prize for that. Yes. I think you should have won, in my opinion. If I was the judge, I would have given you first place.
Thank you.
You're welcome. 16 years late again. But what I also loved about those videos was, I'm sure, first of all, do you get recognized for the videos? Do people ever ask you about them?
ZoomTube is, yes. ZoomTube for sure.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Okay, so I have to ask then. So you did that, you did the Irish music and stuff like that. I feel like it was a little bit ahead of its time in those days, because these days everyone's doing cross-genre things. They're all mixing styles. We're all doing our own thing. But back in 2008, it wasn't that common. So how do you, like, for example, the Irish folk music and that kind of style, where did that all come from?
Well, I came across a recording of Matt Malloy, as so many of us have, in the middle of doing my very, very classical degree, undergrad. And it was one of those moments that I remember, like, what is this? Who is this? How do I? And just sort of this like lighting up of love, just like that I love. And the energy of it, really like the life of it, it was so enlivening at a time where I was struggling a little bit to see myself in the classical world. I love classical music, and I love going to listen. And I just never felt like I couldn't see myself in the sort of very formal culture. It wasn't, again, that word match is coming up. I had this sort of like inner trouble in this moment where I'm completing a degree where I've been doing orchestral excerpts and etudes, and I'm playing principal and I'm winning the competitions. And at the same time, I'm just like, what am I doing here? Where is the compass pointed? And I heard this recording and sat down. I tried my very first toe dipping into Irish music was trying to transcribe that 5 minutes of Matt Malloy playing live the Mason's Apron. It's bananas. I've also tried to transcribe it a second time. And it is so detailed and beautiful and complex. And now looking back, I'm like, wow, that was more than a toe. I was so inspired. Yeah.
And then, but transcribe, like, all the ornamentation as well, everything into it.
Before I even knew what the ornamentation was.
Yeah.
Yes.
Because that's kind of what I did with your video. Like, before I started playing Irish music at all, I was just like listening to it and going, right, I'll just write this out. I'll call it a roll. I'll call it a turn. I'll notate every single thing. And it was a nightmare. Now that I've actually just played the style, it's grand. I just get the tune that I can work around it. But I forget, it takes a lot of work to transcribe Irish music in the like classical format.
Yeah. And I do think there were some benefits to transcribing it. I don't really anymore, because there's an internal process now that just is more easeful. But that said, coming from a tradition where you're reading on a page and are just really, really savvy with having the eye to ear connection, there were a lot of benefits to it. I learned a lot. And also the places where I'm just like, I have no idea what's making that sound, and try something. So it was definitely, there was a lot of learning there, and over time has shifted into being an oral process.
Yeah. But then, okay, so that you're discovering this when you're at music college then, I'm assuming, that kind of age.
Yes.
When you finish your degree,
Yeah.
what do you decide to do then? Because you're obviously thinking, is this word for me? So, and you're what? You're 21, 22, something around that time?
Yes. Hilarious question. I quit flute. So I gave my senior recital, and I walked off stage and handed my flute to my friend, and I said, I don't want to see this again. And I went home and shaved my head. It was this very like dramatic parting. And my flute teacher, John Wyan, told me years later, he was like, when you came in and told me that you were done with lessons for the semester, he's like, I was heartbroken. And he never let on. He just said, okay. And he was like, why don't we have lunch instead? Because there was a soul level thing shifting in me. And he was so kind. And also was like, what are you talking about? You're quitting. What? So that summer, I remember this morning where I was sitting in my underwear watching South Park. Okay. It's like the middle of the day. This is not yeah. And I got a call from a number I didn't know and let it go to voicemail. And then I listened back, and the voice message was, hello, Molly, this is Ian Anderson calling, wondering if you'd want to do some flute work on an upcoming tour. I forgot I had sent in an audition. They were putting together this tour of like Jethro Tull and orchestral arrangements. And so I have now at that point not played for several months. And I was like, oh my God, I called right back and I was like, hello, I would love to come in. And so, I have 6 days to get my shit together. And I did. I mean, it was just like flute for the week. And I went up there and nailed the audition. And they also told me later that they chose me because I nailed the audition and because I said fuck in the room. And they were like, she's probably good.
Yes. Yes. Any more of that in this podcast? Yes.
And that was, it was so fun. It was so fun. It was like, it was something that I hadn't felt in the classical world before. I'm very like, I love to get in and do the details and like the challenge of classical music.
Yeah.
Super fun. Like happy. Yes. Love. And also just, there was something about the culture of like hanging out and shooting the shit and kind of like booping around in the day and then coming into sound check and doing that, playing the show every night. That was just really fun. It's amazing. And that was a big eye opener to me. And then I kind of continued on gigging for a few years in New England, which is where I am from. And then I went to do Masters #1 in Los Angeles at CalArts, which was so important for a New England lady to be around the West Coast culture of like, at CalArts at the time, dogs were allowed in the classroom. And if you woke up one morning and were just like, I don't feel like wearing clothes, you at that time were allowed to come to class naked. That never happened, but I did the orientation weekend. I was came out of a bathroom stall and there was like a perfectly nice naked lady. I was just like, hey. And it was very opening. And I was playing so much music there, all different kinds of music. And
what was the Masters in? Was it specifically flute?
Yes, it was called multi-focus flute performance. So another performance degree. And
Is that necessarily classical music, or is that a bit of everything?
no, it was a bit of everything. I got actually really into baroque music at the time. The baroque teacher there was just, sort of took me under his wing, and it was an enlightening time. And also was doing like African dance and song, and I was in the Balinese gamelan. I was playing shakuhachi. I was in like a tala class. I mean, it was a hyper creative time. And then you're doing all the project that your peers are creating compositions and groups, and you're like, yes, yes, yes. And so wonderful. And I also did, go ahead.
No, I'm just curious when you said baroque music as well, because I feel like a lot of people have that. They see a lot of similarities between baroque music and contemporary music, for example, or even with rock music, with hip hop. I feel like baroque's the one part of the classical world that if you're a little bit different or you're not totally comfortable in it, we gravitate towards that. I've never quite worked out why that is either. If it's a social thing, maybe with a different group of people, or less pressure.
I have noticed that too, and I also don't know why. It's just, there's that energy, and I don't know, baroque music rocks. Like
it really does, man. It really does.
Yeah, and I know that I'm drawn to the sort of contrast between the real like drivingness of the virtuosic pieces and the energy that they create, and just the absolutely stunningly beautiful slower movements. Like it whatever it moves in me, it's a real felt thing.
Yeah, I totally get that. But then, and I'll get back to your studies in a minute, but I'm fascinated by this. What do you think was missing in classical music or traditional classical music as a genre that didn't give you that? Is it the music, or is it everything around the music? Because I struggle with that quite a lot as well. The social class thing, the stuffiness, the formality. But if it was just the music, I'd be delighted with it.
Here's what I'll say. While I do love classical music, I don't find myself ever like putting it on when I'm doing the dishes. Baroque, I will actually. Just sometimes I'm just like, and this morning it is Bach. Let's go.
Yeah. Okay.
And like you mentioned, the culture. I don't know.
I haven't worked it out myself yet either. I'm just asking. I'm trying to. Yeah, I was hoping you might enlighten me, because I feel the same way.
It seems like one of those things that, I don't know if the why matters. If it just sort of is, and the acceptance of like, okay, great. That's I really wrestled with it. I felt like it was at the time when I was around like 20, it was sort of the only path that I knew about. Yeah. And so for me, it was like can I be a musician, or do I have to do something completely different? And it turns out both of those boxes can be checked.
Yeah. Do you know, actually, just when you're saying that, it's so interesting. I was on I say this in every fucking episode of this podcast now, but I was on a date last week with a girl, and she was like, never knew anything about like flute playing, classical music, all that kind of stuff. And she was like, oh, can you make money as a flute player in any genre outside of classical or Irish music? And I was like, yeah, I mean, you can, but there's no like career path. There's no like option for it. It's just like, you know how to do it. You're the person that does it. But there's no like set career path for anything outside of that. And if I was in your shoes, where I'm falling out of love with classical music, but I know I can do it and I want to try different things, I'd still be terrified about the actual career part of it. Of like, okay, what am I actually going to do here?
Yep.
How did you sort of wrestle with that, or was it an issue, or are you the kind of person who just goes, screw it, I'll go out and play, someone will pay me for it at some point, it'd be grand?
Honestly, I think it's a mix. I have a lot of those moments where it's just like, whatever, here's what we're doing, and fine. Creative projects pop up. I mean, I have enough community, I have enough colleagues who catch the vibe. I am a little bit of a recluse when it comes to performing these days. I've just gotten very, very, I like my space. I like my cat, and I like the sort of, I can tell you about that in a little bit, but what I've been working on in recent years. Yeah. And I've had always, since high school, a parallel track of interest in all the layers of being human, especially via body. So I did, I think the only AP class I took in high school was a bodyworks class where we got to go into a dissection lab and see various cadavers that had been dissected in different ways, like horizontally and in these 2-inch sort of discs all the way down a body. It was wild. And then I became a yoga teacher, taught yoga for a decade. I have since done dissection labs. I am in massage training now. I mean, I've had this parallel track. I've done end of life doula training because I love to work with people, and so much of, I mean, every single thing that we are doing on Flute, we're doing via our body. And I got really, really interested in what I would call actual anatomy and working better with our bodies beyond ideas like posture, posture is, it's sort of like it's aiming us in a right direction and can become really problematic when what's often happening on the inside is a tightening response. And
Okay,
just like well, I can get into some details.
Please do.
So let's see. Okay. Okay. So as humans, our bodies have evolved to move. And by move, I mean be in movement always. So stillness is an illusion, and we can create that illusion. It can be really cool. However, even when you're holding what you would call completely still, your circulation is running all throughout your body. And on a cellular level, you're moving. Atlanto-occipital joint, which is the fancy name for your head-spine connection. So it's where the top cervical disc, C1, connects to the occiput. You don't have to know the name head-spine. What's really cool about this joint is that it is the main organizer of movement in mammals. And what that means is that, for instance, like you can picture the movement pattern of a snake side to side, right? Yeah. Slithering, slithering, slithering. We have a more front to back wave. And the way that we're designed is for our head to move first and the rest of us follows. This is a micro movement. This is not, I don't go out there and start leaning forward your head. But this joint, the atlanto-occipital joint, when there is any tightening, it impacts the entirety of the rest of your body.
Okay.
And when there is a movement, it impacts the entirety of the rest of your body. And this impacts your resonance, your ability to resonate. It's sort of like when we tighten, it's like dampening a bell and being like, you can still make sound, but the consequence is that there is a loss of harmonic resonance, right? The acoustics really shift. It's not optimal. So by learning to, it's very simple. Just, we can even do it sitting here right now. So we're going to think, we're going to think this thought wherever you are, you can be walking. The thought is, I ask my head to move delicately on top of my spine so that I can breathe, so that I can do what I'm doing. And you don't have to do, you're just going to let this joint do what it wants to do. You're going to ask the joint to move delicately. And then notice what you're noticing. And we'll do a second experiment. So now we're going to purposely tighten right at this joint, which is sort of between your ears, back behind the, like if you were to follow straight back through your mouth, through the soft palate, it's about there. Okay. So you're going to scrunch there and just notice in your body what you feel. Notice if you feel it anywhere beyond this joint, and then release that because that doesn't feel so good. So you, Gareth, did you have any observation just on that contrast?
When you tighten up at the back, maybe it's because I'm looking for it as well, but I can feel it instantly in like my ankles straight away. I was like, oh, I can feel that there. Maybe it's the way I'm sitting and I'm a bit more aware of it because I'm very aware of like my feet being on the ground at the minute. But yeah, straight away. I was like, oh, that's straight down there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So this will impact your flute playing big time.
Yeah.
You can do it. Actually, it's a really great experiment to do, just to do. And note where what the wording is specific. So we're not saying I'm telling my head or head move delicately. We're asking. Okay, it's an ask. I ask my head to move delicately, and then we see what happens. Maybe you need another ask. Maybe you need to like swiggle around for a minute and then go again. But you kind of know when the feeling throughout your whole system correlates to, well, goodness, honestly. Like, there we go. And then try playing something. And then you can contrast, purposely tighten, try playing that same thing. And a third iteration, which is fun when you're playing around with your instrument, is to start tight, play, and then see what happens when you ask your head to move delicately on top of your spine so that all of you can move, so that you can breathe, so that you can do what you're doing.
That's the class.
But it's moving, and that's so different than trying to sit with good posture. And again, it's not wrong. Do you know, like it's in the right direction, because if you're one of these people who plays like this, that's going to impact your resonance. And so we might want to look at like how your body wants to move, but it's a different way of, rather than, it's an inside out process, rather than posture can be like an imposing of a shape. And then you're trying to, and that imposition is what we tighten around, and then we lose resonance.
Well, that's exactly it, isn't it? Like, I think that most flute players can relate to this, of being told to like release tension or look for tension. It's such a huge issue with flute players. Obviously, being an asymmetrical instrument as well, it doesn't really help. But then the more you think about not creating tension, you get tense about not creating tension. Like, oh shit, my shoulder's tense. Is my shoulder tense? I don't even know now. How do you fix it? Oh shit, how am I going to do this? And then it's like a never-ending negative feedback loop where it just keeps going on and on and on. While I always think it's better to have, instead of saying don't do something, it's better to have a positive. It's better to have an action going forward and saying don't do it. Because you say, like, I remember one teacher showed me this once, because they had always done that with like musical choices. They had always said, like, don't write in your score, like, don't be flat. They said don't do that. That's very negative, and then you're only ruling out the negative, but all the other possibilities are there. So you're not really helping yourself. While if you pick something actionable, you can say, right, well, do that and make it a positive thing. And it works so much better. But I'd never had it for the tension thing. And I never knew about this thing, the head spine.
The head spine, yeah. And so what you're asking for, your ask is movement. Rather than get rid of tension. The ask is movement. And movement is a much more helpful ask than relaxation, because we're not necessarily wanting to be relaxed in the same way. Like if you're laying on the couch watching Netflix, you know, you're not fully relaxed when you're in a state of playing, especially when you're performing. You've got a lot going on. So it's not just, I want to just like flop down. You're doing a very highly skilled set of functions, and movement is what can sew everything together. And just as like there's a lot more nuance to this, and there's like a lot of
course,
tributaries that you can follow. But as an initial, like, where do I go when I'm struggling with something, is asking for movement, and especially in head spine, because it impacts your entire body.
See, this is fascinating. And you know, actually today I was on your website, like checking stuff out and going through it, and I saw like your coaching thing where you help people out, and there's a list of benefits that clients had reported, and I was like, man, if you can get that from flute lessons, I want all those. Now you've told me about that, I'm like, I can see it, because it was things like improve sleep, and I was thinking, how does the flute lesson improve your sleep, and when can I sign up for it? I haven't slept well in 15 years. But is that why then?
Yeah, when people work with me, so I moved into the coaching field because flute lessons were feeling a little bit of like a limited format, and not allowing me to bring my whole self to the exchange. And I am very skilled in working with people and sort of seeing what's going on in somebody else's system, and then helping them navigate so that really big changes can happen in a little amount of time. And that everything that you do for your body impacts your art. And if what you're really asking for is, I want to be a badass flute player, and whatever way that looks for you, then there is no separation from what your body does, how you eat, how you sleep, how you are moving every day, your relationships, your job. There's no separation. And so what often happens is that when somebody comes to work with me, the ask is, I want to get my tone better. Great, amazing. And through this process of working together, all of a sudden you're talking about something that happened in childhood, a conflicting relationship you're having with a band member, and then noticing that those are directly connected to what's going on in your amazing body, and also like your movement patterns, your behavior patterns. And it's a whole, it's a much broader way of working. And because of that, people change in the most beautiful and wild ways. And it's my favorite. It's my favorite thing to do.
But I can imagine that can be quite emotional as well for some people to go through that, especially in a short period of time.
Yes. Can I ask why you made that observation? Is there yeah. What is it about the emotional bit that pinged for you?
I don't know. When you were saying, especially about, I do know actually, I need to stop saying that. When you said about like relationships with bandmates and things like that, I thought, yeah, but then you start going down that rabbit hole of realizing what's going on. It can end up being like a therapy session. You can end up just outpouring, and it all comes out, and it's always linked to, or talking about your childhood. Like, fuck, talking into the childhood, you'd be there all day, and then, yeah, I can imagine that's triggering, and yeah, it's a lot to go through. I'm sure in the best possible way, but my instant reaction to that is I'd be a little bit intimidated about that, about what would come out if I started going down that route.
Yeah, why?
I don't know. Maybe it's the space and the context of it all. It's something you would expect more from a therapy session, I think. So
yes.
if I'm in therapy, I would expect that. I'd be a little bit mentally prepared for it. Whilst if I came to you and said, I want to make my tone better, and then that came out of it, it would be like a bit of oh, wow, wasn't expecting that.
It is different than therapy, absolutely. And you're also right that you're not the first person to say that. I mean, I've said that by working with the non-therapist people that I work with. Mm. And the space that I create is very safe, and it's usually a relief. I mean, actually, it's I'm trying to think if there are any exceptions to that. I had one sweet client who, did sort of all this stuff sort of came bubbling out. And then the next day she left me a message and was like, I wish I hadn't said that. And I asked her why. And it sort of was because she didn't want to put that burden on my shoulders. However, we talked it out, and honestly, for me, it feels like so much more of a burden to pretend that those things aren't there. It's really, really healing to have somebody, an untroubled presence, just be with you in whatever is coming up. And then to connect the dots to why that's impacting you and how it always makes sense. Yeah. And there's a theme of relief with everybody that I have worked with. And that, in your body, when you start just like imagining the feeling of relief, is like, oh, that really matters. Again, if we're talking about playing.
Yeah, it's, first of all, fascinating. And second of all, it's a theme that loosely connecting to this theme that I've been talking a lot about with different people on this podcast is the need for, I don't want to say reform within classical music teaching, but certainly huge changes are needed within it, because I feel like the system of one-to-one instrumental teaching is massively outdated, and it's brought a lot of mental health issues with people. It's brought a lot of identity issues with people over the years. And I feel like this is the kind of thing we should be using a little bit more. I'm sure you get a lot of clients as well that have maybe fallen out of love with classical music or have studied to a high level and then have came through it that way.
Yes, and it really matters, the one-to-one. That's a really interesting idea. I mean, it really matters on the one-to-one. I've had a number of people come who have been told things by music teachers in a one-to-one situation at various times in their life that are so cruel and
Yeah.
and not an indication of them at all. It's only revealing what the teacher's limits are. But things
Yeah.
like, oh, you can't learn by ear. Your lips are shaped in a way that mean you can't play. What the fuck are you talking about?
Yeah.
And those shape people's lives. I mean, people go
Hugely.
decades running the belief that I can't do this because, and then somehow come into my world.
Mhm.
And they're not true. None of those are true. And it's like, that is one of the things that I feel very passionate about, is when people have been told something by a music teacher, when people are going into music because it's straight from the heart.
Yeah, exactly.
And when you're told like, oh, well, this isn't going to be possible for you, in the same way, that is straight to breaking your heart. And
oh my God, yeah.
And it's just wrong. Like, but there are also incredible teachers who are the opposite. People who lift people up, who only see possibility, who communicate truthfully about the work that a student can aim at. But yeah, one-to-ones really can go any which way, which is why I really like having multiple teachers,
Yeah, that's also a good
sources, multiple endpoints, so that you're never getting into the dogma of one specific human being.
Yeah, it is incredibly difficult for a lot of people. And I think one of the saddest things I see is the amount of people that will go to music college or high level music studies and then come out and fucking hate classical music, like with a passion. And you're thinking, at least if you've studied that level, you should be coming out, going to orchestra concerts, enjoying it because you've been in that world, and you might want to not do it as a career, but you should be falling in love with it. But they, not only are they not in love with it, they actively hate it. They have a real chip on their shoulder. They're bothered by it because of the education and the things that happen to them in music college. Like, fuck that whole world. I'm getting away from it. And you're like, man, it's just music. It should be nice. It should be something that enriches your life. It's not, with all the best intentions in the world, it doesn't matter that much overall in the grander scheme of things in life. It's a beautiful thing, but it should be something that only enriches. It shouldn't be something that fucks you off. And it's so sad. And I think as a teacher, your job is, no matter what level they are, what they want, they should come away feeling better about themselves and better about music and better about creating art, no matter what happens. And it's so rare these days. And it's so fucking sad. I hate seeing it. But I'm glad to see some teachers are starting to change it. But the old school style of teaching, like, I've heard horrific things of what teachers have said to students in lessons. And like, I've had shit said to me over the years where, like, even when I was like 25, 26, and I've had it said, I thought, if someone said that to me in a pub, I would hit them. But suddenly, in the context of a music lesson, you're like, yeah, no, sorry, no problems at all. And you start crying and you take it so personally. I thought, this is just some dude saying this to me. This is just some dude being an absolute wanker right to my face. And I have total right to be a wanker back. But you don't, classical music teaching, you don't, these are your idols. These are people that matter to you. Your identity is so closely intertwined to your success in the instrument. You wouldn't dream of talking back to them. And it's such a weird thing.
Yeah, and I think that it goes beyond classical music too.
Interesting. I will think about that because that is very interesting. See, you're giving me all kinds of things to think about. The best thing is I wrote out like ideas of questions and stuff because I always have like questions down just in case, this conversation's a bit slow or I want to just pick up or turn it around. Haven't used any of them. Haven't used a single fucking one. It's been great. But at one point I will have to do one. Okay, there is one thing I do want to ask you about because we talked a little bit over Instagram about this and we'd said like, because, okay, rewind a little bit. When I put your name on the list about wanting to interview, I'm not going to lie, it was purely because I was just such a fan of those first two videos. I was like, just for me, just for Gareth, I want to get that. I Googled your name to see like what you were up to these days. Then I went onto your website and I was like, holy fuck, she's doing everything. Like, what is she not doing here? And I was so interested in them. I was chatting to you. I was like, can we pick like one or two things that you really want to talk about? Because one podcast episode, we're never going to get into all this. And you had said, and I'm going to make myself look so fucking stupid right now, but I don't care. I'm embracing it. You had said something about studying human anatomy, and you said, I think most people haven't encountered a cadaver in such a way or in any way at all. And I'm not going to lie, I didn't know that a cadaver meant a body until about 3 days ago. I thought it was some kind of knife.
Oh,
So,
interesting. Yeah, like
there you
a
are.
scalpel. Yeah.
Yeah, I thought it was that. I literally thought it was that. And then I was like, oh, because I Googled it and it was like body, and I was like, oh, it's just it's a medical term for corpse. Didn't know that.
Exactly.
But
yes.
I do want to ask you about that in general.
How the heck I got into
I want to see what the link is here.
Cadavers? No, it's a legitimate question. So I've been studying with Gil Hedley, who is a famous and incredible anatomist. He's created a different model of anatomy called integral anatomy. So what you and I have learned is based on what we would call like regional anatomy, meaning that we divide the body into parts and separate things and name them. Like, this is my head, and this is my shoulder, and this is my arm. And that's all true. Like, regional anatomy, super important, because if you go into the doctor and you're like, doctor, my stomach hurts, and then they start operating on your foot, that is a problem. So we love our regional anatomy.
Yeah.
And like we were talking about earlier, the idea that any part of me is separate from any other part of me is false. And even beyond that the idea that you and I are separate is false. That this plant and I are separate is, we are not. Okay. We are one entity. And Gil's integral anatomy is a different model that is looking for connections, continuities, and relationships. One beautiful example is the nerve tree, where we say, okay, well, my brain, where's my brain? My brain is in my head. When you get to look at the tissues of the body and hold them, there is no separation between the tissues of your brain and what becomes your spinal cord and what branches and tendrils to the periphery of you. They're not separate. The only separation is when I can take a scalpel and run it here and then say, okay, that's my brain and that's something else. But in reality, they are one. And his model is looking to nature to see how nature is reflecting me, is reflecting nature, is reflecting you, is reflecting nature. Like, we are all connected. It's a beautiful way of looking at the body and of life. And I learned about his work about 15 years ago, and he has a huge YouTube presence. One of his life goals is the democratization of education. So if you are interested in this work at all, he has a lot of videos that feature human dissection, and he also has videos that don't. So if you're squeamish about that, totally cool. You can still learn a lot. I was very squeamish, and 15 years ago, I was like, that is so cool what he's doing. I could never do that. And then in January of 2023, seemingly out of the blue, though I don't sort of believe things happen when they happen, I just thought about his work. It occurred to me, hadn't thought about it in a while. And it was like a lightning bolt went through my body. It was a very physical, visceral sensation. And I was like, I have to apply. And I don't understand why I do things often. I'm very good about trusting those instincts and following them. And like, there was an aliveness, and I applied, and within 48 hours I was accepted. So I did my first lab, which was 6 days in a lab in Colorado Springs. Mm-hmm. And it's 6 full days. You're in a lab coat, you're gloved up, and the whole rhythm of the week is you start in a circle of appreciation. And first you're meeting everybody else who's in the room, setting the tone, which is extremely loving. And then when the donors, the cadavers, when they're wheeled out into the room, they're covered at first. And we have a circle of appreciation, holding hands around them with votive candles and a few other choice objects. And the space is created to acknowledge that these are our teachers. And while they are not alive humans anymore, that they were, and they have families And so we really give thanks for everybody in the room, for our teachers, the donors themselves,
Wow.
and for their family. There's a real level of space created that makes the cutting part okay. Like
Yeah.
if you were to walk in, like on the last day of this cadaver lab, if you were to walk in from the street and somehow stumble into the lab, you would be horrified probably, because you haven't been on this journey throughout the week. But we reflect layer by layer the skin, the superficial fascia, we get to deep fascia and muscles and viscera and bones. And it is life-changing and life-giving. And there are like deep belly laughs and tears and so much learning. So much recognition of how amazing it is that we get these bodies. These are like the most highly sophisticated technology that we know of, and we just get to hang out with them. It's just a gift.
Yeah.
And in the first cadaver lab, when we reflected the ribs to get to see the lung tissue. This is lung tissue of a fixed form in this case, which means that it's a cadaver that's been embalmed.
Okay.
Preserved by chemicals. And the benefit of that is that you get to see an approximation of shape and relationship versus an unfixed form, which I did get to work on last year. And things sort of flop a little bit, but you retain color. Like neither of them are true. They're not a living being.
Yeah.
That said, you get to learn some things from each one of them. And when we looked at the lung tissue, it's this pink. In the unfixed, it was sort of in the fixed form, it was sort of a light pink, like more beige because of the chemical process. And there were like rivers of black. And somebody in my class said, "Oh, they're a smoker." And Gil said, "Nope, that's just the footprint of living in our polluted world."
Oh, wow.
And that has stuck with me. And if I'm being, which I feel like I can be, just very frank, for many years have had an off and on relationship with smoking weed. And it's never been at peace.
Okay.
There's something about when I would be in one of, like a few months of just like getting high. And there's this idea I have that like, this is fun. This is more fun. And I'm doing this now and it's harmless. And then I'm looking at this lung tissue as somebody who is not a smoker and just being like, huh. And in more recent years, I'm training for an Olympic distance triathlon.
I saw this.
And a few months back, I had been smoking and I was doing the game that we do. I know it's like such a human thing, which is why I think it's important to talk about, because I know I'm not alone in this. And especially as flute players, this game of like, okay, well, I can do it, so it's fine. It's not a big deal. And then I started noticing, because of my training, I was like, this absolutely impacts my breath capacity. Like I'm just kind of in this denial relationship.
Yeah.
And that said, my dad needs cannabis. My partner needs cannabis. This is not like a morally right or wrong thing.
Yeah.
It's actually, I think, much more complex than that. But the image of the rivers of black in healthy lung tissue has stuck with me. And I think the question for me more recently is about what is it to be in cooperation with my body and cooperation with my energy, and what is right relationship with this medicinal plant?
Okay.
And the truthful answer to that was just kind of an immediate, once I got my words around it, because have framed it in like, I should, I shouldn't. It's good, it's bad. Anytime that like black and white thinking, it doesn't stick for me. Like it has to be the like, what is the actual question here? And of living a life as flute players, what we are doing is breathing in to our body. We are taking in life. That life becomes us into our tissues. And then as we exhale, we create sound and literally breathe life into each other, into other people. This is about life force and vitality. And that is what has once again shifted the tide into how I am cooperating. I'm not smoking anymore.
That is beautifully put as well. You hear that phrase, breathing life into the instrument, but I'd never really considered it in that much depth. And actually the cannabis thing is an interesting subject. It's something I've been trying to find someone to talk about different drugs with music, especially like hallucinogens or things like that, and creativity and the links between them, because it's not something I'm super educated on. And I would love to get someone on to talk about that, because I think it's a fascinating subject. And especially in classical music, we don't talk about it. Nobody talks about it.
I know.
And we all know what they're doing out there here. I was at NFA last year, and there was a couple of doobies knocking about. I could smell it here. I could smell it a few miles up, but we didn't talk about it. Just give me some of that. But nobody talks about it.
I know. And I don't think that's helping anybody. Like,
yeah, because we're all talking about it outside of classical music, and we're all doing it normally. So why pretend that we're above it? And then beta blockers and all as well. There's a lot of drugs being used like acceptably in classical music. So why can we not talk about other drug use?
Agreed.
I don't see the issue with
Hard
it.
agree. Yeah.
This is a fascinating subject. And I'm always curious how you're going to link the whole cadaver studying human anatomy back into directly linked to flute playing, but there you are. You've done it beautifully. It is fascinating. We have talked for an hour now, so I have to move on to the fun questions. But before I do all that, normally I get people to plug themselves a little bit at the end, but I'd rather do it now just by refresh on this, because people are going to be listening to this going, this all sounds so fucking interesting. How can people find more about you?
I mean, you can absolutely visit my website, which I'm Molly A. McLaughlin. Whoever the poor lady is that has the email mollymclaughlin@gmail.com, God bless her. She has received so many emails from me. I am Molly
because there's a soccer
McLaughlin.
player. Do you know this?
Well, there's so many Molly McLaughlins.
There's a soccer player, yeah. She's very good as well. She played for America.
Soccer player? Okay, cool. So many Molly McLaughlins. Anyway, it's a good name. But that's my email at Gmail, and then also website. I mean, if you just Google Molly McLaughlin flute dork, then it'll probably come up.
Yeah, that's the way I found it.
And Instagram, and Facebook, the things. And I'm a person, so just, if you have questions about things or you feel like you want to work together, just pop me a message. And for anybody who wants to work to me, it is a little bit of a higher, like you were identifying correctly, it's a higher level of commitment, engagement. And so we do a free call where there's I will not pressure you. There's no obligation. It's just so you can get a more accurate idea of what there is for you. And I would be happy to do that with whoever would like. I love those calls. They are so fun.
Beautiful. I hope someone does it. Yeah, I would love to hear about it as well. So amazing. Okay, well, thank you then. The end of the podcast. I don't know. I did send you these, didn't I? The sort of quick fire fun questions. Let's get started then. Do you have a favorite flute concerto?
The truthful answer is no. But I did just go through my flute music, and I can go away from concertos and love the Bach sonatas, and also I love the Vidor suite.
Oh yeah, man, the Vidor suite's cute. Yeah, it's a good piece.
So good. Yeah.
Okay, calling it cute there was a bit demeaning as well. I didn't mean to call it cute, but it is cute. No. It's cute as fuck. Do you have a favorite Bach sonata?
I'm gonna have to go E minor. It's E minor.
That's the correct answer. Yeah. Good. Do you remember the first flute album that you bought?
I do, and it was a little bit later in my life, but it's Moody's Mood for Love, James Moody. Do you know that album?
No.
Get on it. It is the album that you need when someone's like, jazz flute is not cool. Moody's Mood for Love.
Okay.
So good.
It's been a long time since someone's given me an answer to that question that I didn't know. So, thank you very much for that.
Very well.
Okay. Do you remember the first album in general that you bought?
Janet Jackson, Rhythm Nation.
Fuck, I knew you were going to give such a good answer to this, and you have not disappointed. That is fucking great. Janet Jackson. Oh,
Yeah.
man. What year was that album? That was like 2003 or something, was it not? That was quite early on.
Early. Oh, that's earlier. Yeah.
Great album.
92 or 4. Like,
Oh, was it as early as that?
Yeah.
Oh,
I was 8 or 10, and I was born in 84.
See, I was thinking in my head it was around that time when the nipple fell out. That album. Do you remember when Janet Jackson's nipple fell out in one of the shows?
I sure do. But I think that was later.
Yeah, that's like 2002.
Hold on, let's find out. Okay.
Yeah, I can guess when the nipple thing happened, but I'm not great on the exact years of the albums.
Actually, it was 1989.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it was early.
Okay, that's a really cool album as well. Janet Jackson, fucking good answer. Okay, what song would you sing at karaoke? I feel like you've definitely done karaoke before. You've got karaoke written all over you.
Gareth, I would wish all of my extroverted friends the best time at karaoke while I am home in my bed singing a song to my cat. That is
you wouldn't do it. No way.
Yeah, it's
You've
more.
Never done it.
More. I've done karaoke.
Yeah, there we are. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Okay, so what would you sing if I made you do it now?
Honestly, I really feel like I would Irish exit. I would be like, hold on, I have to go Google this song, and then I would be gone.
Okay. Which is so weird because you're a performing musician. Like, yeah, but everyone has, well, not everyone, a lot of people have this similar reaction to this as well. Like, no, I wouldn't do it. Also, fun fact, in Germany, they don't call it an Irish goodbye. They call it a Polish goodbye in Germany. Each country has their own version of that. Yeah, how fun is that? And in Ireland, we just call it goodbye.
Goodbye.
But, okay, well, I'm not going to make it. What did you sing when you did karaoke, though?
I don't remember. I was in South Korea, and I do not remember.
Okay, well, we'll not ask any more questions about that then. If you could switch instruments, would be as good as you are on the flute, although I know you play a lot of instruments, but what would you switch to? So if no more flute, you had to pick something else.
I probably voice or percussion.
But just not karaoke. Voice, but not karaoke.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay.
It's going to keep you up at night.
It is. Okay, if you could, again, a question that, I don't know, because you're kind of doing this, but if you could have a career outside of music, what would you do?
Yeah, probably what I'm doing.
Exactly, yeah.
And also, one of the beautiful things that I get to do in the world is that I help people die, which is very important to me. So people who are at the end of their lives and their families, I support them and help them do that in the most peaceful way possible.
Yeah, that's the doula, is that what you call it?
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah, I googled that because I saw that on your website and I was like, oh, that's a tough job.
I think it's the most beautiful. For me,
I can believe
the chit chat and the shallow things are difficult.
Yeah.
The depth stuff is much easier. So for me, it is a beautiful job.
That is definitely the first person to say that answer as well. So fantastic. If you could have a pint with any musician, alive or dead, who would it be?
Ella Fitzgerald.
Excellent. Okay, and then the last question: do you have a favorite alcoholic or non-alcoholic drink? You can answer both.
I love bubble water. I don't drink anymore, but I love bubble water. Bubbles.
Bubble water?
Yeah.
Like sparkling water?
Like seltzer, yeah. Yeah.
Okay. You would love it in Germany, man. We're mad for sparkling water here in Germany. We actually have, when you go, people don't believe me when I say this, when you go to the supermarket in Germany, they have like levels of sparkling. So you can get like a little bit sparkly and then medium sparkly and then very sparkly. The very sparkly one, like that's like, you know, the fucking Perrier and all that shit.
Yeah.
Very low level sparkling water. Come to Germany. It's great here. We love our sparkling water here. We're mad for it. Germans wouldn't drink still water if you thanked them. They wouldn't pay you for it. They wouldn't thank you for still water. It's that bad actually when you order classic water in the restaurant, that's sparkling. Sparkling's the classic. Then they run it back. There you are. Sparkling water. Great answer. Great. Well, then there we are. We got to the end of the podcast. Beautiful.
And Gareth, I just want to say that I can feel so clearly your warmth and really love of flute, and also everybody who is in this field and gets to do flute in their life. And I think what you're doing is so important and so beautiful. And thank you for putting yourself out there and spending all your time and energy organizing and reaching out and really being a broadcaster for what is... something I love so much. Thank you.
Well, that's incredibly kind of you to say. That's very sweet. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Yeah, I have no idea what to say now. So thank you for that. And I suppose I'll say thank you to... Yeah. Fuck off. See you next week.
Get your man the flute to play song, the fuck.